It's Friday, November 7th, and the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted what they think could be a pretty legit setup for severe weather today in parts of Middle Tennessee and Kentucky. That is going to be a slight risk of severe weather. Then we have a larger marginal risk, which spans all the way from the Gulf Coast and parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and the far western Florida Panhandle, all the way up to southern Ohio. Now, believe it or not, our slight risk is actually going to be fueled by a 15% chance of hail. Now, I'm not super sure of if we'll see anything like this develop. Definitely think in this higher risk area, we could potentially see maybe hail around 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. But I think it would be really surprising to see anything higher than that. Then, of course, the rest of our risk area, just some regular 1 to maybe 1.5 inch in diameter hail possible. We also have a wind risk. Our entire marginal risk area could potentially see some damaging winds up to 60 miles an hour. Then we also have a very large, slight, pretty small risk for tornadoes, actually only a 2%. Not really expecting anything more than some weak spin ups with this, which once again goes from the Gulf Coast all the way up to only this time northern Kentucky, and it's a bit skinnier. Now, we do also have a risk of severe weather tomorrow. This is just going to be a pretty large marginal risk over the southeast. With this, I think this is going to mostly be a damaging wind threat, so be on the lookout for that also. Now, this is what the radar could look like as we go in today, and you may notice that we're not really seeing anything that looks super crazy on radar for a slight risk of severe weather. This is going to be our main slight risk right here, this little area from this cold front, and a positively tilted trough moving through are going to be the main initiators for our storms today. And for a hail risk, we normally look for more discrete cells, which we're not really seeing here. It looks like it's going to be a pretty linear mode, maybe on the southern side of this part, maybe this one specific cell near the southern portions of Nashville, which could be predicted, could produce some hail, maybe in that 1.5 to 2 inch in diameter range, but I'm just not really seeing it. I still definitely do think these storms will have a chance to produce some damaging wind gust, maybe even a tornado, and then also some hail. But I think all the risk for those are going to be on the lower scale on kind of our level of echelons. I'm not really expecting to see anything crazy with this. And then we also see a pretty big gap in our area from Tennessee, or the southern part of Tennessee, all the way up to around Huntsville, Alabama. There's kind of a gap right there. But for our main line up here, I think this is going to push into probably parts of North Carolina by close to midnight. Then it's going to start to dissipate, and that risk will be essentially done with that. Now, focusing a little bit more on the southeast right here, this is also going to be an area where we're going to have our front pushing through. It actually looks like we even have a little bit of confluence going on here also. And actually, I think this could maybe spring some surprises today. I think this could have a chance of overperforming of what has been expected out of it. We actually do see a couple of more, maybe even discrete cells pop up on the HRRR. I'm not 100% sure we'll see something like this, but there is absolutely a chance for it. This is where the strongest advection from the Gulf is going to be along this line of confluence. So we're going to see the most moisture and the most unstable air, and the shear here is going to be pretty solid as well. We do have a small cap in place, and our lapse rates aren't super great, but I definitely do think there is actually a pretty solid chance for maybe some isolated severe weather in far parts of southern Mississippi and Alabama, and even maybe the far western portions of the Florida Panhandle. It looks like these storms are really going to peak around the early to maybe even sunset hours. So I think early afternoon to sunset hours are going to be the peak. And then maybe even when that low level jet kicks in right here, we even actually see a little bit of increase in the strength of this lone cell. We could maybe see a tornado threat, maybe ramp up a little bit, but that's going to be pretty much it for our risk areas. And this big trough is going to be one of the main causers, along with that cold front, of why we're seeing all of this weather today. First and foremost, we do see a little bit of a jet max in the right front quadrant of our jet stream right around here in parts of Middle Tennessee and Central Kentucky. I think that is one of the reasons why the SPC is kind of clinging on to why they think there could be a increased threat for hail there. And then we also see maybe a little bit of a prefrontal trough, if you will, in parts of Mississippi and Alabama. I think that's one of the reasons why we could see maybe some more robust storm development down there, despite all the things holding it back. And then another thing to note, maybe even back here in parts of southern Montana, northern Idaho, and northern Wyoming, we could maybe see a couple of thunderstorms, because we're actually going to see another jet max push through probably around lunchtime, and that could bring definitely a couple of thunderstorms, maybe something to watch back there as well. Now, before we look at our weather soundings and we really dig deep into the storm environments and what we're actually expecting to see today, we are still going to see a trend of some pretty warm temperatures, except for the far northern parts of the US, including the Rockies and the far northeast. It looks like in parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Florida, we could be seeing some maybe mid feels like 80s temperatures. Same going in the desert southwest, and then really all the way up to our freezing line, which looks like it's going to reside probably around the Minnesota and Dakota borders today, maybe even parts of northern Wisconsin. We could see feels like temperatures all the way up to the mid 60s. So definitely not the worst weather, but still pretty warm for what we would kind of start to expect for this time of year. And then as this kind of develops, we're actually going to notice, obviously it's going to get colder as we go into the night, but tomorrow our freezing line is going to creep a little bit more southward, and it's going to continue to do this until we get that really major Arctic blast, probably around the 10th or 11th next week. So moving back to severe weather, this is a weather sounding for our slight risk area in parts of middle Tennessee and central Kentucky. Definitely a couple of things which could look favorable for severe weather. First and foremost is going to be the shear. The past couple of weeks, really the main thing holding these setups together has been really favorable shear as some more cold and dry air pushes in. And I think we're going to have some really favorable organizational shear. This is what really fuels those strong rotating updrafts. And I think that's one of the reasons why the SPC has highlighted a larger risk for some hail. 60 knots of bulk shear, I think that's really good. Definitely think we're going to be able to get some maybe even robust rotating updrafts today with that. And then even our low level shear is pretty solid. One of the reasons why I think maybe a spin up tornado threat is possible. Also, our cloud bases are going to be low enough for that, and we do have some curvature in our hodograph. Now, one of the main hindrances for this setup is going to be a lower moisture amount in our main risk area. Only a 57 dew point. We do have a little bit of an inverted V profile here on the surface, which does look pretty favorable for severe weather, maybe even some dry air aloft, and a pretty low freezing level also. But something we're really lacking is going to be that instability, maybe only reaching up to 200 joules per kilogram of CAPE. Then our 3 CAPE isn't all that good either. So with this lack of moisture and lack of instability, I think these storms are really going to rely on the shear and the forcing from our trough and cold front to really get going. So I'm not 100% sure on if these risks will actually be higher on the echelon scale or if there will be lower. Definitely leaning towards lower, but I also think that those risks will still probably be present in that slight risk area. So definitely still prepare for them, just not 100% sure that we're actually going to see a slight risk-worthy event come to fruition. And then moving a little bit more down south to parts of the Florida Panhandle, Mississippi, and Alabama, I think we also have a somewhat favorable setup here for maybe some severe weather. The most glaring difference from more further up north in Tennessee and Kentucky is that we do have larger amounts of CAPE, close to 1,000. Then our 3 CAPE also isn't going to be great, but because our actual CAPE is going to be closer to 1,000, I definitely think that has a much larger chance of producing some more robust thunderstorms. Also, our shear is still going to be quite good down here as we have what looks to maybe be a prefrontal trough ejecting through parts of northern Mississippi and Alabama. I think our low level shear is absolutely going to be enough to kind of yield a little bit of a weak spin up tornado threat. Our cloud base is going to be low enough. We do have some curvature in the lower levels of our hodograph. Our bulk shear is also going to be solid for some organized storms. Now, the main thing with this is that we don't really have that high of lapse rates. More kind of straight up lapse rates are what we're seeing, so not really that steep, not really super favorable for thunderstorm development. Now, we do have some dry air aloft, which could also be capping our environment a little bit, which isn't something you really want to see because the forcing down here is going to be a lot weaker. It's going to be from a line of confluence and just mostly from warm air advection from the Gulf. So definitely a lot weaker. This could maybe yield some issues for the development of our storms, but overall, I think our environment down here in more southern portions of our risk could maybe overperform a little bit. I also think all hazards are possible down here as well. So definitely be on the lookout if you're in that area that I'm pointing out, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle also.